In the fishes and basal tetrapods, we will be discussing about the reign of the reptiles. The reign means there are some organisms in the geological and the biological history of life. They have dominated the particular eras in the geological history. So those eras are called reigns. For example, the reptiles were the organisms that at some point were reigning the surface of Earth, as we as human and the mammals in general are reigning the surface of Earth now. So how did they come to dominate the surface of Earth? First organism to colonize the terrestrial environment were the amphibians. Amphibian only made it halfway onto the land. So how do we call that? That it is halfway. They didn't come entirely onto the land because they still reproduce swimming tadpoles. So in some point in their life, their gametes were present in the water. Their tadpoles were dependent on the water. So in some point in their life, they were dependent on the water. And some of the amphibian, they were spending entire their life inside the water. Some did adapt to the terrestrial environment later in their life cycle, but most of them were still dependent on the water as well. So reptiles and their descendants, they had this problem where if they have to adopt entirely onto the land, then they have to develop such eggs which are able to bear the harsh condition of the terrestrial environment. So they had some adaptations in their eggs or in their reproductive organs, and we will be discussing about that. So what are the adaptations in their eggs? They developed some cladoid or the closed eggs. So what does the cladoid or closed egg? That means their eggs were shelled. These eggs were present in the membranes as well as a shell, right? So tough semi-permeable shell was covering that egg. If we see the aquatic organisms such as fish or amphibian, their eggs are not covered by this shell because they do not dehydrate inside the aquatic environment. The terrestrial environment has lack of water, and anything that contains water will eventually dry out after evaporation. Same will happen to the egg, and the larvae will dry out and die. So to counter this problem, the reptiles were able to make such eggs which were able to bear the external insults of the environment. And they have developed some membranes as well, and they were also called amniotic eggs. Amniotic means that there is a membrane which is called amnion. It is covering the fertilized egg or the embryo, and it contains fluid, and it is a membrane which is semi-permeable. So they are those organisms that were making the amniotic eggs. They were making a whole clade which is called Amniota, and these included the reptiles, bird, and mammals. So what are those membranes that we are talking about? So one of them we have discussed already, that is amnion. It encloses the embryo. And then there is the second one which is called the allantois, and it collects the waste. So this membrane is collecting all the waste products that is made by the embryo during the course of development and the metabolism, and these are collected inside the allantois. And the third one is the chorion, that is lining the eggshell. If you open a hard-boiled egg, you would see a very thin membrane just inside the shell, and that is called the chorion. It is the outermost membrane. And then there is the yolk, a yellow material rich in the protein, and it provides the nourishment to the embryo. So here you can see the cladoid egg of amniotes in cross section. It is showing the eggshell extra-embryonic membranes. So from the left upper side, you can see the allantois, which is for the waste collection. The yolk sac is containing the yolk. On the right upper corner, you can see the amnion, and amnion is covering the embryo, right? So the embryo is having an eye here, And the outermost, just beneath the eggshell, is the chorion, which is shown on the. So this is different membranes and the shell of the cladoid egg. So oldest known amniote is Hylonomus from the mid-Carboniferous of Canada. And we do not have any eggs to say that this is the Hylonomus which was making such chorionic egg, amniotic eggs. So no amniotic eggs are known from the Carboniferous, but we, with the help of the clade, the knowledge of clades, or other evidences that we have, we can say that this was the organism which were producing eggs. So here you can see the earliest reptile, the mid-Carboniferous reptile, Hylonomus, and you can see the skeleton and the skull. So these are the organisms which are based on the reptiles that will come later. We'll see that these are divided in different clades based on their skull shape. So we'll be discussing about that. So then there is the radiation. During the late Carboniferous, the radiation of amniote took place, and they made three main clades, and these clades were distinguished by the patterns of opening in the side of skull, the temporal opening behind the eye socket. So if you see, the eye sockets are where the eyes are present, and just beneath the eye sockets you will see the temporal openings from which the ears are emerging in the mammals, but there were no any ears in the reptiles. So these temporal openings, based on these, we can divide these in three groups. So there are the anapsids. There is no arc, the skull pattern. There are no temporal opening in the anapsids. Then there are the synapsids. They have some same arch, and there is lower temporal opening. And then there are the diapsids. That means the two arch patterns, and they have the two temporal openings. So here you have the early reptile evolution, the anapsid, synapsis, and diapsid. So if you see anapsid, you can see that there is no temporal opening. You cannot see any black dot behind the eye sockets or black round circle. And then there are the synapsid. You can see one round circle behind the eye socket. And in the diapsid, there are the two round circles behind the eye socket. And in the next, you can see that this resulted into early reptile evolution. And on the basis of these openings, we can divide the amniota. If you go further in the Carboniferous, the synapsida, anapsida, and diapsida. There are the three clades which are dividing further into the advanced organisms.